I am very much working my way through the season 7 box set at the moment, and I particularly loved the Malcolm Hulk looking for Mac. Never has a man before had so much. Such a communist, and he had a dossier on him. Apologies if you haven't watched it, but he had a dossier on him from MI5, about akin to about a decade's worth of Greater London Yellow Pages. And this is a guy who writes for Doctor Who. Yet you wouldn't have known of his political. This is what that gets my goat about the modern era. You wouldn't have known about his political.
So by modern parlance, he would be known to the authorities. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
And one thing that sort of doesn't really go away, which is kind of in line with your sense of humour, so does chime in with that with season 7, specifically this prop, as seen here in the shed at Shawcroft, all the way back in 1964-65. I'm not sure who that gentleman is. He doesn't look too pleased to be having his photograph taken either, does he?
He looks like he's been super glued to the console as a practical joke, and they've all gone out for tea.
They've come back from Greg's. It's like, really?
you gits. All I was doing was looking for the fast return switch, and there I am. Stuck fast to the console.
So I think this was when they were performing some sort of maintenance on the original prop rather than actually building it. But obviously it's a storied prop. I think we all love it. The original incarnation in particular. It's a bit of a design classic from Peter Brachke himself, along with the rest of the console room, all put together by a seasoned team. Magic somehow happened, but as is often the case over the years, people start tampering with it, tinkering with it, and the purpose that it was built for the changes. Even if the prop itself has further life in it, sometimes it's got no natural home because the show that it was attached to has already evolved, and that really started to happen, didn't it? From under the very casters of this poor prop, and nowhere was it more apparent really than in season 7. We talked about this a little because it became part of the collection, didn't it, on Blu-ray, say last month or so. And we all got excited. I know you certainly did, and we joined the whole thing where we were sort of counting down until it was released. And we were messaging, weren't we, back and forth, as yours arrived yet, and all that kind of thing. It's all part of the fun. But as with every season of classic Doctor Who, when it does arrive on Blu-ray, it does have a habit with me of kicking the dust off some of the old niggles, bones of contention, stuff that's always sort of bothered me or amused me. And that's been sort of the case with you and this, hasn't it, specifically in line with that prop. So what's been on your mind about it? Because obviously by 1970, the Doctor was stranded on Earth. He couldn't go anywhere with the TARDIS, but they had to find a way of incorporating it into the narrative, didn't they?
Something that always has bothered me is obviously the dimensions of the police box are like a wardrobe. It is a bit like Narnia, if you see what I mean. It is not like your 4-door wardrobe from IKEA or any other sort of manufacturing wardrobe department. So how on earth, and this troubled me from the first time I ever saw the TARDIS outside the TARDIS console, outside the TARDIS, which I think was the documentary Resistance is Useless from the Talking Brummy Anorak in 1992.
Oh, yes. Trevor.
Was that a friend of yours?
Yeah, that's my cousin Trevor. We exchange Christmas cards. We don't see each other very often, but we do exchange Christmas cards.
I probably his Parker coat gets in the way, but was the fact that it was a black and white clip from the Ambassadors of Death of the TARDIS prop outside the TARDIS. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, how did he get it out? And I'm trying to figure out, a bit right said Fred to me to you, we even took the doors off, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Several cups of tea later, some two burly.
Lots of pushing and shoving, a bit of purchase.
some two burly unit soldiers emerge exhausted from trying to get the console out, and I'm thinking, how on earth did they get the console out? And then secondly, we see in Inferno that he has to link up the console to a damn great big huge nuclear reactor to get it to work. Okay. Yeah, in the Ambassadors of Death, I don't see a nuclear reactor in that in his sort of makeshift
Oh.
laboratory stroke entertainment area. Um, and I'm thinking, how on earth does he power it? Because one would expect, and I mean we've seen it in later Doctor Who, is that the console is there, but then it's wired underneath, or loads of cables underneath it to another energy source. I mean, in the TV movie, it was even powered by the Eye of Harmony, or so they said.
A mystical MacGuffin. Yeah.
Yeah, mystical MacGuffin. So, one, how does he disconnect it from everything else?
Mm.
Two, how on earth does he get power for it in Ambassadors of Death? Is it running off the telly in the background? Or has he put some of the contents of his drinks cabinet in there to get some biofuel for it?
Yes. It's run
And
on
then
whiskey.
it's, it's run on spiced TARDIS rum. And then and then worst of all, how does he get it back in again? How does it transport people? Because one would expect that it 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 would transport the whole room, just not somebody standing in a specific
In
place.
general proximity. I mean, I
Yeah,
think I've got several theories about this. Some of them are annoyingly practical, and
yeah.
others are total pie in the sky, complete nonsense headcanon of the best kind.
Go on. I look forward
Well,
to hearing your
I
theories.
think that in the fiction of it, I'd like to think that if somebody is, particularly if they're touching it, that they are
Yeah.
completing some sort of circuit in the way
Oh,
that the
yeah.
TARDIS has got
Yeah.
telepathic circuits.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that could, by extension, transport anywhere that the console itself could physically go. Then, if you're making physical contact with it, as well as mental contact with it. Therefore, you're all becoming one. We all, that
Yeah.
and it, we would then form part of a circuit in effect, which could make any journey with
I see sort of
the.
part of like a sentient object. You
Mm.
become part of it, and yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that theory.
That's the
Yeah,
best I've got.
is it okay?
As
It's sort of one of those things that have bugged me for years and years and years. And what we must not forget is that in season 7 and Inferno, it was the last time that the original TARDIS console prop appeared. The which was beautiful, the beautiful green of it. It wasn't quite green, but it was sort of like this luminous paint. But it had those wonderful, almost sort of large ball bearing, sort of things around, almost like it was almost like a kite in the central column, surrounded by the brass bells. I mean, that's not the original one because it's got
no,
the luminous green, sort of like strip lights from your mum's kitchen. And but I
yeah, my
do.
mum does still have those in her kitchen.
It's not
Yes.
come on yet. It's blinking, it's blinking, it's blinking. Come on. Um, but I do so love that original prop because it looks like it looks like a complete alien piece of manufacture, even though it's got switches and handles, and there's a handy Geiger counter on there that people don't pay attention to. Um, and then it's just a marvelous prop. And as you said, you mentioned the designer of whom wasn't particularly loved by a lot of his colleagues.
No, no.
Um,
An
but yeah,
oddball character by all accounts.
yeah. and some, you'd hear Ray Kuzik say, and that's on the sort of the Edge of Destruction DVD, say that, oh, he was a bloody nightmare, and Verity Lambert saying, oh God, I just didn't get on with him, and but he made a wonderful, wonderful design of what became the just such an amazing piece of work from five bob and a couple of cotton reels, and and Ray Kuzik said that the console and the set, and especially the fault locator, which is sadly missed. We need a new fault locator.
We need one. I mean, you'd never be able to find it in the middle of all this, would you? I mean,
Jesus,
whether it's snowing or not, there's too much. There's simply too much going on.
Yeah, it's sort of, my goodness me, what it's like that looks like to me like a sort of cross between a swimming pool and a disused nightclub just gone wrong.
It does look like a disused nightclub. You're absolutely right. I mean, I remember in the 80s in particular, whereby I desperately wanted Doctor Who to be up to speed and to keep up with changing trends, the way that cinema and television, genre programming, as we would now consider it, geek culture, was evolving. So I'd see pictures of the original TARDIS prop, and it would look so quaint, a little tacky, and I was pleased at the time that Doctor Who had sort of left those days behind it, and the prop from the 80s was there was far more buttons, and there was lots more bits of sort of glass. Well, I thought it was glass at the time, but it's just extra bits of plastic. So it had made some effort to keep up, I suppose, with general tastes, design aesthetics, and sort of complexities, things that were able to be realised on screen. Now, when I look back to that original prop, that is actually more so, even though I didn't grow up with it, but that original one from '63 is kind of where my heart lies, because in many respects, I think that everything that one needs is actually in that original design, both in the shape of it, the finishing touches to each line, and the instruments that are set into it as well. The Heath Robinson-ness of it, the Wallace and Gromit kind of aesthetic to it, is actually part of the appeal. And so, whilst I'm easily wowed by a new console room, if I see new images, for example, when this latest one was revealed, which I think we got some snaps, didn't we, of it in 2022, which we weren't supposed to see, and then we got the full reveal a little while later. So I was really charmed by that, was swept up in that. But it very quickly lost its shine. And in all reality, I think most of them have, even the ones that I'm fond of, because my heart does kind of lie with that original prop. And in some respects, I think that the best option for them, they've never really considered it. Oh, actually, they have. Oh, no, don't make me say nice things about Chris Chibnall. In many respects, I think that they, by going back to that original proper as near as they possibly can, is probably where the sweet spot is with this. And more to the point, all the audiences really need, whether they're us, the dyed in the wool fans, or the general audience either, because we don't spend that much time in the TARDIS as it is. The idea is really, really hokey. So it doesn't need to emulate the Bridge of the Enterprise or anything we see in any other show. I don't think that's what people in truth want from Doctor Who. And the kind of isn't that an egg timer? Isn't that a bit off my nan's off my nan's tea's made? That aspect to it is actually all part of the fun. And those little questions about, well, how would he do that? Or where would that go? Or hang on a minute, wasn't that bit over the other side last week? All of that, none of it needs explaining. We can do it all in our imaginations, in our heads. It's all part of the fun. Because the odds are the Doctor's tinkered in between adventures. The Doctor doesn't just sit around scratching his bum, flicking through the Radio Times and sort of swiping on Tinder or something like that. He messes around. He messes around with the TARDIS. I think that's ideally what would be the case now, as it was then when John Pertwee was the Doctor. Even though he was rarely out of that smoking jacket, I think he probably did have a set of overalls. Which he tugged on, and he could get nice and greasy and still get to work under there. I mean, I do have a theory about how he did manage to get the TARDIS out of the TARDIS, out of the police box, and into the laboratory. But have you managed to arrive at one? Because this is your niggle. Have you
Yeah,
managed to get there in the time in between? Because those doors, they are narrow.
I have depressingly found out the answer, which is
See what I mean? You
because
don't want to know, do you?
no, it's because it's such a dull answer. What I had various different theories, like he would shrink the console, he would take parts of it apart. But then I had the problem with, what if he takes part of it apart? Then you get the issue like, what would happen if the column came out and there'd be a massive bang and everything like that, like the Edge of Destruction shows.
It's one thing for something to happen by accident, though, like it happens in Edge of Destruction and multiple sort of Hartnell stories in particular. But if he's anticipating a problem, you could always make
Yeah.
sure that it's like when you turn
It's
your stopcock off.
disconnected. Yeah, turn off the power. But
Yeah.
I actually, my best sort of, this is how far I went. The best sort of theory I had,
Okay.
linking it to Doctor Who and Doctor Who lore,
Mm.
was the fact that, hang on a minute, right? Okay, and apologies for anybody. Spoiler alert for those who haven't listened to um, the Dead Shoes on the Hornet's Nest
Oh,
series
okay.
yet of Tom Baker. But there is a point whereby in that twice in those stories whereby he uses the resonance of the sonic screwdriver to alter the size of himself and also a
Of
pair of ballet
himself.
slippers. Yes, of himself and the Ernestina Stott, who is the ballet dancer, because they're miniaturized by Mrs. Wibsey. Uh, so this is the lengths I went into trying to find the theory that he
Only
uses something.
Paul Mask would come up with an idea like this.
Yeah, I know. So Paul Mars has got a lot of credit for this. So I thought Paul Mars has got the answer here. Paul Mars has got the answer. This is how he did it. He used the resonance of the sonic screwdriver to alter the size of the TARDIS doors or the console to get it outside. I'm thinking that's got to be the best answer ever. That's got to be the most sensible issue. Well, I go on to the Doctor Who discontinuity guide, and I won't tell you the answer just yet, but I was feeling all smug and everything like that, and then I looked and then I found the answer, and I felt absolutely thoroughly bored by it
Okay.
because it was just spat out in a few words. I went, really? That's the best you could come up with?
Please do.
Uh, the answer I found was the Doctor manages to do it by reconfiguring the architectural design of the TARDIS.
You're right. That's really. Oh God, yeah, I'm with Paul Mars actually.
I'm so much within Paul Mars, and I would like the I can't even say it, the discontinuity guide, because it's that boring, to actually change it to saying, the Doctor is able to change the size of thing with his by finding the right sonic resonance with his sonic screwdriver, and that's such a better way of doing it.
Long story.
It's
Now overdue. An update. I think the discontinuity guide. It's now the
oh
discombobulated guide.
yes, a very discombobulated guide, but it goes back to the wonderful TARDIS prop and what you were saying about how it's all very clinical, it's all very disco, it's all very nightclubby. The whole point, and going back to the Joe Martin thing, the whole point of the Doctor's TARDIS was that it was awaiting repair because it was knackered, it was antiquated, it was going to be scrapped because it was a museum piece. So the thing is about the TARDIS console and the TARDIS itself, it should look
Shit.
very much like Wallace and Gromit. It should look trashed. There should be teacups on there. There should be door handles. There should be make, do, amend. It shouldn't look fantastically brilliant because we are talking about a space time ship which is ready for the scrap heap. and it should be antiquated. It should be like that. And one of the best TARDIS designs and TARDIS consoles I think they had was the console that they used in the Gothic period of Philip Hinchcliffe. Very ornate wooden paneling. I know that's what they used as a sort of blueprint for Paul McGann's TARDIS, but it was just this ramshackle, knackered piece of equipment. And when you had the Christopher Eccleston's TARDIS console, it was a bit make do and mend. It was a bit, you've got the IKEA piece of the IKEA ball that you have as well as part of it, and it should have the paperweight. It should have door handles. It should have the things that are everyday objects that he has had to sort of use and improvise to keep it going. And
isn't there one point in a Christopher Eccleston episode where they arrive on a planet or in a time zone or something like that, and he's worked all the levers and he sort of used that bicycle pump that he's got on there, and then he hits something on the top of the console, and it's like a bell, like when you're ringing for service when you go into a hotel to say, like, I'm here, like, I've booked a room, bing, like that. I think, God, to me, that was Doctor Who. It's why I've always loved that season.
Yes, it should be like that. Like when Peter Davison Doctors redevelops the console or refurbishes the console at the beginning of 5 Doctors, he goes to open the door and it doesn't work, so it gives it a good old bang. The door's open, and the fact that the Doctor loves that Doctor and his console. It's like a man and his greatest love, in the fact that he cleans it, he dusts it, and he looks after it and talks to it like you would do a car engine, and encourages it and coaxes it. And you don't get that same feeling from this ultra modern console because it looks brand new. It looks brand, the William Hartnell's TARDIS had switches and handles and door handles and levers, and you expected it to break down at any moment. In fact, the first malfunction with the TARDIS was due to a spring getting stuck. So that's how knackered the machine is. Even the springs don't work properly. So it should be like that, and it should be a really botched together prop like it is there, which they've never went back to. The fact is, the Doctor can give you a massive electric shock if you touch it by making it live. So it's not only is it this powerful thing, but it's capable of being a taser too. It's
you see, I've always liked the idea that is something the Doctor builds into it, that actually the natural state of this thing is actually that it's always live, and that's an inhibitor that's been built into it by the Doctor, so that he can touch it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to touch it any more than anybody else couldn't.
Yeah.
Anyone who, like, when Ian gets that shock in the very first episode. I think we've got used to seeing starships and vehicles that can talk, that can communicate, and that can pilot themselves if need be. But back when Doctor Who was originally birthed, the idea that something could almost have a will of its own and could function independently was haunting in many respects. I mean, for example, Russell T Davies talks about how one of his earliest memories, I think, of Doctor Who is of watching the final episode to the 10th Planet and seeing, as the Doctor was saying, "Oh, my, this whole body's wearing a bit thin," the TARDIS controls, because he was in a weakened state, working independently, as if they'd taken, because the Doctor couldn't work them anymore. It had taken control of its own function. So the switches and levers were operating, and you saw them flicking unaided. And I like that idea. I like it that that there's a cooperation and a
Mm,
relationship between the pilot and the TARDIS, whereby one will take over and perform maintenance on the other at either side of that
mm.
relationship when the other party needs them to. That
Sort of,
disarray that the Doctor is in, that turmoil
yeah,
almost. Sometimes the TARDIS is better placed to cope with that than others, and when it isn't, it might spit a Doctor out entirely.
exactly, which is lovely. But I prefer it. I preferred the regenerations whereby the TARDIS just sort of like did nothing, because that made you more focus on the central character. 10th planet apart.
I think that he actually did take it apart. I think that
Mm.
it was taken apart in sort of chunks, not literally piece by piece, but I think it could sort of come apart in the way that some sofas have got a sort of bar. If
Yes.
you're moving a large
Yeah.
sofa into a smaller home, you say, well, there's actually a bolt that runs through that. You can take it into halves and you put the bolt back through. I think it's probably similar with the TARDIS, and that you think, well, how could you possibly do that with something with so many constituent parts and it's all so crucial to its operation, and whether anything catastrophic could happen if bits don't line up exactly where they're supposed to. And I believe that could be where the TARDIS toolkit comes in. I think that everything he would need to perform that function, not to the specifications of remaining sort of completely safe and localizing any sort of energy or rechanneling it somewhere where it could safely go, would probably reside within this special TARDIS toolkit. I've never been too sure whether this was a collection of instruments that the Doctor sort of accumulated and bagged together himself, or whether it was standard issue back at the depot when they were originally sending these things out as a fleet. Whenever they got the latest upgrade, did the TARDIS toolkits come with it? I think that's probably a conversation for another time as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, if he didn't have the right tools in the TARDIS toolkit, he would have used anything. He was very much like my granddad, who could, and of that generation, the sort of like the those that were in the Second World War and fought in the Second World War, they were amazed. They could make anything out of anything. They would use any sort of tool they could find. If they couldn't find the right tool, they would make a tool.
Fashion one,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, fashion one. And the thing is, I could imagine John Pertwee using an old wheel spanner like he did in Death to the Daleks, and a turn handle.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you've said that. My granddad was exactly the same. He'd got in his shed, he'd got the vice, he'd got the workbench, everything but the test tubes he
yeah,
owned. Very similar to the Doctor's shack as we see in Inferno, even down to the corrugated iron panels and things like that that were all being built. It's
yes,
exactly
yeah,
like that. And I'm looking at this TARDIS toolkit now, and I've just noticed something very clever here. So a little detail that I've never picked up on before, in that all of the instruments sort of fastened into the side. I know this is the one. I think this is the one from the TV movie. But how a lot of these instruments that are bound inside the lid, the detailing of those is very similar to the barrel of the 11th Doctor's sonic screwdriver and other bits of
yes,
kit that we see
yes, you're
later.
right.
I wonder if that's deliberate. But
It's
yeah, I think between us, we've come to, well, we haven't got the answer, but we've got some answers,
yes.
enough to amuse us for a little while,
I'm
at any rate.
I'm going with the fact that Paul Mars has accidentally discovered how he did it in a sort of science fiction, in a science way. In a practical way, the Doctor's done an MFI. Okay, we know he has a penchant for MFI furniture, obviously from Planet of the Daleks. Um, so he's obviously, you know, patented the first sort of DIY and then take it down sort of manual. So he's taken it apart and he's wheeled it out, as you said, and then redistributed the power correctly and fastened everything together as it should. And that's how it works. Um, which is
Ta-da.
far better than reconfiguring the architectural design of the TARDIS.
Yeah, it's all very sort of logopolitan, isn't it? That it's which
It's
again, that also, as
absolutely
much as I love that story, I still find that
yeah,
a bit of a yawn as well. And of course, when he does get it back into the TARDIS, into the police box, we never see that either. He seems quite happy to work out of a standard unit laboratory for a little while. So there's clearly
yeah,
there was method to the madness, I think. But what we need to know is what you think of our madness. So David's initial niggle. What is he on? But what do you think of the various conclusions that each of us have come to that could resolve one of the age-old, well, certainly 55-year-old questions of Doctor Who history? You get back to us with your suggestions, your ideas, your total and utter headcanon, or any mad idea that you may have in the comments section.